Welcome, Hercules.
Who are you? I can't see you.
Oh, let your eyes adjust. This black throne doesn't look familiar. You've seen it before. You came here and stole my two-headed dog Cerberus for one of your famous labors. I didn't like that.
Wait.
Nor did I like it when you rescued that faithful wife. You still don't know where you are. Welcome back to the Underworld, Hercules. Only this time it is you who are dead.
Hades. The new lady must be Persephone, queen of the dead.
Oh, I am Hercules. I long for news of the living. Ah, my queen. Always so eager to greet new arrivals. Well, how does it feel, Hercules, to have lived such a loud life, and now to find yourself in this silent place?
I should not be here. Zeus and the Fates decreed that when I died, I should go to Mount Olympus.
Ah, yes, Zeus, my overweening brother, always tampering with people's lives as he tampered with yours.
I find you unamusing.
Still easy to get along with, aren't you, Hercules? Wasn't that always a problem for you, your temper?
You listen to me. If you'd been born the son of the greatest of the gods and a mortal woman, and all you got was a few paltry powers, and no immortality to shield you from your mistakes, you would have a temper too. But I overcame that.
Still, you were fancy you mistreated by someone.
All my life I've wondered if I'd been born an ordinary man, free to go about his life, whether I would have been a happier one. Still, I had my glory.
Oh yes, you cut a wide swath across the world, Hercules. You killed many men, monsters, lions, and a few children as I
Speak not of that.
No, I've touched a nerve.
Let me out of here, Hades. I warn you.
Oh, what are you going to do? Strike me dead? Very well, Hercules. My brother Zeus indeed intends to lift you up to Mount Olympus, but first, I do have my powers, you know. My wife, Persephone, she longs for news of the living. She longs for the world above during these months of the pomegranate when I have her here. Unlike you, she may not leave. Simply tell us your story.
Lady, if I tell you my story, I can leave.
Yes, Hercules.
Very well. My mother, Alcmene, loved my mortal father, Amphitryon. But she would not have him in her bed until she had watched him avenge the deaths of her brothers. So while Amphitryon was away, Zeus came to mother, disguised as Amphitryon, and fathered me. So who is my father? Zeus. But it was Amphitryon who raised me and loved me, and my brother Iphicles.
Oh yes, Iphicles was Amphitryon's real son. The boy was mortal.
I was mortal. I could be killed at any moment, just like any other man.
But you weren't.
No. But Hera tried. She hated when Zeus fathered babies with mortal women, and so she hated me even before I was born. So she sent a serpent one night. I was there in the cradle with my brother Hercules, just little babies looking up, and suddenly two heads appeared above me. I didn't know what they were. Hercules started screaming, but I just grabbed the two snakes by their necks and I started playing with them. Everyone ran into the palace, but by then the snakes were dead. I didn't know what they were. After that, I was raised as a warrior.
Oh, no, not just a warrior. What about Linus, your music teacher? You were given a general education. What about Linus? Yes, Hercules, what about poor Linus?
First, I never regretted my rages. I was the strongest of the strongest people around me, stronger than any of the adults. So I asked myself, why shouldn't I do exactly as I pleased? And so I treated other people as if they didn't really matter, especially musicians, weak people. I could ride, I could fight, I could wrestle, but I could not play that lyre with its skinny little strings that always break. I tried, but one day Linus, he was my music teacher.
He was the brother of Orpheus. He hopped his way in and out of the underworld. That's not easy to do.
Well, one day I broke a string, and Linus said, Hercules, please don't break any more strings. And I said, here, then you play it. And poof, I hit him with it.
You killed him.
Half the people I killed, I never meant to. I was just too strong. I tapped Linus on his head.
You killed him.
He died from the blow. When my father Amphitryon heard of what I'd done, he said, Hercules, you cannot live among people until you gain control over this rage that is in you. So he banished me. I went into the wilderness, and I lived simply, but I killed lions. The shepherds loved me. And then finally, I journeyed to Thebes, and it was there that King Creon gave me his daughter, Megara, in marriage. I loved Megara, and she loved me. I wasn't the best of husbands, I know that now. Always breaking things. But she forgave me all my faults, and my babies, they never even knew I had any faults. I was happy. I was to be king one day.
Your children.
Yes, my children. You know, you grow up rooted in your senses. As a rider and an archer and a fighter, I'd always trusted my senses. I trusted that what I saw was there, and what I heard was sound made by what I saw. But one day, I was thrown up into a terrible storm of blood. Suddenly, it was as if my senses were torn out, and monsters came at me from all around me. Centaurs, enemies, lions. I was in a fight for my life, and so I destroyed them all. And then my head stopped spinning. I looked around me.
What did you see, great hero?
There'd been no lions, no enemies. My wife and children lay dead at my feet. found their blood on my hands.
And what did you do?
I ran. I ran into the wilderness. I left all people behind. How could anyone be around me when I go mad again? And would I kill them for no reason? I'd always loved my strength, but it was something I could no longer trust if I couldn't govern it with my mind. I lived on berries and squirrels. Finally, I went to the oracle at Delphi. I wondered if anyone could tell me why my life was such a ruin. It would be the oracle. I remember walking into the temple and hearing Apollo's lyre playing. And that's when I learned about my life.
Oh yes, about Hera's hatred of you.
She had already had Zeus and the Fates agree that for me to be free of the guilt for killing my family, that I would have to perform 10 labors for my cousin Eurystheus of Mycenae, the weakest man in the world. Isn't that ironic? I'm the strongest, and I had to be under his thumb.
But they did give you that way out, Hercules. Your 12 labors.
It was supposed to have been 10, but 2 of them ended up not counting. Yes, the oracle said that if I could perform those labors for Eurystheus, I'd be free of his rule, and more importantly, free of the guilt of killing my family. It ate at me all the time. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I would dream, and there my dead wife and babies would be at my feet.
So you went to Mycenae, did you?
I went to the court of Eurystheus, and I walked in, and he trembled on his throne and said,
"What do you want, cousin?"
That voice, I hated that voice. "I've come to serve you, Eurystheus. Zeus commands I perform 10 labors for you. I am yours to command."
"Well, why me?"
"How should I know?" He didn't want me there.
He wanted you dead, Hercules.
I think that's why he sent me after the great lion. In Nemean, there lived a great lion. It was killing sheep and shepherds and any hunters that went to try to slay it. When I arrived in Nemean, people showed me its cave, and so I threw in some burning branches and backed away. I had my club and my arrows. My arrows could pierce stone. And suddenly the lion came roaring out. It was 3 times the size of any lion I'd ever seen. And so I shot at it with an arrow, but the arrow bounced off its hide. I couldn't believe it, and it came at me. I had to take my club and hit it on its head again and again, until finally I stunned it long enough to run around behind it, get my arm around its neck, and squeeze.
You strangled it?
Something in its neck broke. I felt triumphant. And so I dragged the carcass all the way back to Mycenae and dumped it at Eurystheus' feet. But he was afraid of it. He said,
What is that?"
"It's the Nemean Lion."
"Well, what is it doing here?"
"You told me to kill it, remember?"
"But I didn't tell you to bring it here. Take it away."
was still afraid of it. I dragged it out onto the portico, but I remembered that hide that my arrow couldn't penetrate. I tried to get the hide off. A knife would not cut the hide. A sword, a spear point, axes, nothing would cut that hide. And then I realized it had its own claws, so I tore out one of its lion claws and slit its belly open that way. Then I skinned it, and I kept the hide attached to the giant lion's head, and I hollowed out the skull to make a helmet. After that, arrows bounced off me.
But not the arrows of fate, Hercules?
No, they bounce off no one.
Wasn't it then, Hercules, that you killed the Hydra at Lake Lerna?
You know this, don't you?
Whenever anything immortal dies, the entire underworld shudders.
Yes, there was a well called the Fountain of Anemone with 3 fountainheads gushing fresh water. It was along the shores of Lake Lerna. But the Hydra, dragon with 9 heads, had wrapped around the stone so people could no longer get the water. Everything was dead around it for miles.
Wasn't one of its heads immortal?
Oh, it was, but worse than that. Its blood. The slightest spatter on your skin, and you die.
Weren't you afraid?
No. But I thought I might need some help. So I invited my young nephew Powerless to come with me. Remember when we entered the swamps? It stank. And as we waded along, I had my lion's skin on, and my club, and my arrows. And then we saw it up there, all its 9 heads moving on its neck, and it was saying,
Uncle, that's it.
that's it. Stay here. Well, what did you do? Well, I walked up and I knocked off a head, and the blood sprayed all around me, but I turned around and it landed on my lion's skin and could not burn through. And I said, ha! Now I will slay you. But before I could knock off another head, suddenly 2 heads bubbled out of the bloody hole where the first head had disappeared. And I said, what is this? I knocked those 2 off, and 2 more heads bubbled out. And I said, this is not working. So I called to Iolus and I said, Iolus, find a torch and light it. And when I knock off these heads, sear the bloody neck so that no more heads can grow. Brave boy that he was, did it. And I said, as I knocked one off and he ran up and the head did not grow, and I said, now you die. The hardest part was dodging the poisoned blood.
Well, what about the immortal head?
Oh, the immortal head. I knocked it off too, but it wouldn't die. It kept snapping at me, coming across the mud all by itself. I was disgusted. I took a big boulder and dropped it right on the head and jumped on it and sank it into the mud. Probably still there, snapping in the mud.
Well, that was the easiest labor.
I made a terrible mistake. All around me, once the Hydra was dead, there were the pools of its poisonous blood. So I took my arrowheads and I dipped every last one in the blood. From that day forward, anything my arrows touched, the slightest scratch, would instantly die.
And you lived to regret that?
I thought it was wise at the time.
Hercules, do you wish to rest?
Why?
Well,
Do you think for one moment that I enjoy sitting here telling you this? Do you think for one moment I would not rather be in Olympus instead of talking to you two dreary souls?
Hades is rude. Yes, Hercules. Remember, you only have the power of speech here in the Underworld because I grant it. If you want me to remove your voice...
No. I'll calm myself. I learned to do it. Took a long time. But look at me. I'm as cool as an Arcadian stream. Artemis, the virgin goddess of the hunt, owned a stag. It had hoofs of brass, antlers of gold. It was sacred and beautiful. It could run for a year, people said, and never get tired. Hunters were afraid to come upon it in the forest. For Artemis, if she thought they were hunting it, she would strike them dead. I knew I'd have to run for at least a year. Once Eurystheus said,
Hercules? Bring me the Cyrenian stag.
But cousin, it's a sacred beast.
Yes, it is. And it's my command, my choice. Zeus said I could, so do it.
I began to look for it. And finally, after weeks of hunting, I spotted it in a glade up ahead. And I began to chase it. All I remember for that year of running, as we traversed all of Europe, was the clang of its brass hoofs on the stones before me, and the sound of my breathing. But I did not let it out of my sight until finally, after all that running, the year passed, and I cornered it between some crags. Poor, beautiful thing. Its sides were heaving. It was afraid. And I said, "Don't be afraid. You remind me of some innocence and beauty I once knew." Nevertheless, I walked up and grabbed it by its antlers, when suddenly, from a boulder, a beautiful young girl hopped down and drew a bow and arrow and aimed it at my heart. It was Artemis. Of all the immortals I've seen, this virgin really did look the youngest. And she said,
Let it go, mortal. It's mine.
Goddess, I am Hercules. Zeus and the fates have decreed that I bring this animal to Eurystheus of Mycenae. I will not harm it. I will protect it. She didn't remove the arrows targeted my chest, and then finally she let out a little breath.
Pretty well. Just Just don't touch it. So, I didn't. It will follow you to Eurystheus' palace. Just don't touch it.
So I began to walk. And lo, the Cyrenian stag followed me all the way into Eurystheus' palace. He stood up when he saw it. It glowed a beautiful effulgence, this creature. Olympian light. And he stood up and looked at all the people and said,
Oh, look, everyone, look! The Cyrenian stag belongs to me! Oh,
he stepped down from his throne.
If I may touch you.
Don't.
Well, you touched it, didn't you?
Only once. Once too many times.
Oh, go sit in that pit of Tartarus, Hercules.
And he walked up to touch it, and it vanished. Not for mortal hands, you know. Such an idiot he was.
But you'd fulfilled the labor, yes?
Bring me the Cyrenian stag. He didn't say anything about touching it.
Hercules, weren't there any women?
Well, no. What am I supposed to do? Fall in love and then turn around and lose my mind and kill someone? I didn't trust myself.
So that was 3 labors then.
3 labors. As you know, a wild boar can gut a man with his tusks easily, even a small boar. In Erymanthus, there was a giant boar. I wasn't surprised when he sent me after it. They said that it was so big that it could, when it charged by a man, the bristles on its side would strip off the man's face. Huge. So I journeyed to Erymanthus. But on my way, I found myself in Centaur country.
Oh, they're horrid beasts.
Yeah, I thought I had a temper. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's having a horse's body and a man's torso that puts them in such a bad mood all the time.
No. It's because their father, Ixion of the Lepiths, tried to carry off Hera once. And Zeus didn't like that. And so Ixion is now tied here to a flaming wheel in the underworld. I can take you to him. All he does is scream.
No, thank you.
I'll take you to him. All he does is scream.
No, thank you. I had only trusted one centaur truly in my life. My old teacher. But I found myself in Centaur country, and I came upon the cave of Pholus. He was an old centaur, and he and I had spoken in the past and not fought, and he invited me into his cave.
He said, "Yeah, Hercules, big boy. Hungry?"
Yes, Pholus. I'm thirsty too.
I'll cook your meat. We don't like it. We like it raw, cooked. No blood, no stink.
I appreciate you cooking mine, Pholus. Is there any wine?
I've got it. Can't open it.
Why not?
The other centaurs, they'll smell it. Come here. Smell it. The wine on the wind, and they'll go mad with the smell of wine. They'll come here, kill you.
Well, they try to kill me, they'll regret that. Besides, I'm thirsty and they'll never smell it. Open the wine, Pholus. I never should have let him open the wine. As soon as he did, the smell drifted down into the hollows, and I heard the sound of thundering hoofs, and suddenly they came charging in. Lots of centaurs, and they were mad at the smell of the wine. Powerless saw and said, "Run, you fools, run, run! It's Hercules, he'll kill you all! Run, run!" But they were mad with the smell of wine, and they attacked me. I had no choice but to defend myself, and I clubbed some of them as they came at me, and then others I shot with my poisoned arrows, until finally the last survivors galloped out of the cave. It was awful. There were dead centaurs all around me. Powerless picked up one of my arrows, astounded that such a small dart could kill centaurs so fast. And I said, "Don't pick that up, don't touch it. Powerless, it's Hydra blood." I think I startled the old beast. He dropped it and it scratched his leg. He gave me a look I'll never forget. And then he crumpled down and died. Those cursed arrows.
How sad.
I'd lost my taste for wine.
What about the Nemean boar?
Not much to tell. I found him, I clubbed him insensate, dragged him by his hind hoofs all the way back to my zini. But when Eurystheus heard that I was coming back to the city with the boar, he grew afraid as always, and he ran and hid. There were giant urns in his hall, big enough to hold a few men, and he jumped inside one. That was annoying. So I took the boar. Every time it awakened, I clubbed it on its head and it fell back asleep. I think it had a very uncomfortable journey. But I picked up the boar and I dropped it in there with Eurystheus. They both just stared at each other, afraid to move. And then he jumped out and ran. And he ran out. I think he had a bristle in his behind. I needed to laugh about them. But the next day, he came back and said,
"You think you can humiliate me, Hercules? How does it feel to stand neck deep in cow dung?"
What was he getting at? What are you saying?
Ever heard of King Algius of Elise? The biggest stables in the world. More cattle than anyone, and supposedly no one's ever cleaned the stables. The filth, it's piled up to the rafters.
What was he saying? How dangerous could cows be? What are you saying?
Go clean the Algian stables, Hercules. And don't return until you do.
I knew better than to argue. But I was furious, cleaning up dung. It's the work of a slave. But I swallowed my pride and I journeyed to Elise, crossed the river Alpheus, and went to King Algius' palace. Next morning, he took me out to the stables. It was impossible. Acres and acres of stables, all with dung piled up to the ceilings.
"Well, strong man," he said, We know you're strong. Let's see if you're fast.
And he threw me a little wooden shovel. It was dawn. Before I left, Eurystheus, as I was walking out, said,
Oh, and there's one last thing. You must do it in one day.
What?
Sign up to sundown or it doesn't count. I'll tell the king.
And so they left me. His retinue laughed at me as I stood there by the stable doors.
Well, did you do it?
Of course I did it.
But how? You had the help of the gods?
No. I stood there, and off in the distance, the river Alpheus was sparkling in the dawn light. And I thought to myself, I need the shoulders of 10,000 men. A river is like the shoulders of 10,000 men.
You took the stables to the river?
No, I brought the river to the stables. I started cutting a trench as wide as the stable doors and as deep as I was tall, and I made my way all that morning toward the river, and finally I grew within a few arms' lengths of it, and then I threw in some boulders to dam it up, and then tore loose all the soil, and lo, those 10,000 shoulders of water rushed right down my trench. They walked right into the stables and washed all the dung away. It took an hour. I leaned on my shovel.
Well, that was the easiest labor yet.
If it counted. But when King Algus returned, he saw what I'd done, and he claimed I'd cheated and refused to pay me. And then, when I went back to Mycenae, Eurystheus on his throne said,
Ha! Well, that labor doesn't count, Hercules. Nor do I think I'll give you credit for killing the Hydra, either.
Why not?
Because your nephew went with you. You had help.
I felt lost. All I'd done felt like it was for nothing. But then the vision, my babies and my wife came back, and they were here in this place with you. No voices. They haunted me. And I knew I had to go on.
Hercules, in Stymphalos there are birds. I want you to drive off.
Birds. They're dangerous, I take it.
Oh, from what I understand, they're deadly. They have iron claws, and they have feathers of brass, which they hurl like razor-sharp arrows. And they've taken to carrying off sheep and unattended children. They've infested the forests of Stymphalos. Go solve the people's problem. Hercules, drive them off.
So I thought, how will I do this? I packed an extra wide bronze shield. a giant brass bell. And I journeyed to Stephalos. And the people led me out onto a meadow and then ran back into the forest. Across the meadow, I could see them, larger than the largest eagles I'd ever beheld. There were so many of them as they ground their brass feathers together. It sounded like 10,000 blacksmiths banging on their anvils. And beneath them, in their roofs, there was a pile of deepening guano with bones of people and tattered clothing. Why the gods make such things, I will never understand. But what did you do? I walked out into the middle of the field, and I just stood there.
Did you use your bell?
Not yet. And I waited. And then one of them flapped loose from a lower branch and came toward me. I took my bow and shot an arrow, and it bounced off the bird's brass feathers. And then I ducked under my shield and clang, clang, clang. I heard 3 clangs, and then I stood up, and he had thrown 3 of his feathers at me. Their points were razor sharp. And in that moment, I knew how I would defeat them.
Well, how if they were invulnerable to your arrows?
Their feathers were brass, but not their bodies. And so I walked out, and I began to ring my bell, and I called to them, "Ha! Cowardly little sparrows! I will crush your chicks! I will burn your stinking nests!" And I began to ring the bell loudly, and then suddenly they all lifted up out of the trees. It looked like a giant was forming out of the bodies of these birds, and they all came at me.
Did you fight back?
Of course not. I hid beneath my shield. You ever stood in rain that's drumming on a roof above you? That's what they sounded like, the arrows flying down, drumming on my shield. I waited for them to pass after they had come in 3 or 4 ranks, and I stood back up out from under my shield. The ground around me looked like a bed of nails, and I cried, "I'm still here! I will crush your nests! I will crack your stinking eggs!" And again they came at me, again and again. So finally, so many of them had thrown so many feathers, I started to see bare patches on their bodies. And I shot an arrow, and one of them screamed and fell to the ground. And then I shot another, and another one fell, and more and more. They began to panic, going in circles, and I ran into the trees, and I began to shake the trees back and forth. Babies fell, eggs splattered into the guano. This was too much for them. Some of them flew off, and the ones who couldn't lay there on the field. I speared them where they lay. And then I took a few brass feathers, and I went home.
Hercules, I'm very impressed.
Are you, Queen?
Oh, yes. Oh, hold your heart back, Persephone. He won't be here long. I've never heard anything like this. Perhaps this isn't such a good idea.
Just let me go now. my story. I'm quite happy to leave it.
No, I want to hear the rest of it.
Very well. There were many other labors, but slowly I went through them. Queen Hippolyta's war girdle, that turned out tragically. Geryon the giant, the white bull, Zeus and King Minos. But each year as I came back, having accomplished these goals, Eurystheus knew that as soon as I was no longer in his power, I could crush him like a bug.
You are still so full of rage, Hercules.
Of course. But finally, it was my 11th labor. By now, Eurystheus had developed a tick in his eye. He knew his time commanding me was almost over. He wanted this next labor to take a long time. And so he said,
Hercules, I want 3 little things. The apples of the Hesperides.
Cousin, they belong to the gods. They're sacred. No one knows where they are. They're at the ends of the earth.
Yes. Sweet apples with golden skins. How far is the ends of the earth, Hercules? Bring me 3, and don't come back until you do.
So I began a journey. It took me a long time. Finally, I found from some river nymphs, the only one who knew where the apples of the Hesperides in the garden of the Hesperides were, was Nereus, the old man of the sea, father of all the Nereids. They said, find him by the sea's edge and grapple with him until he tells you what you wish to know. But beware, he's a shape changer. I journeyed until I found him, an old man with green seaweed for hair. And I grabbed him, but suddenly he turned into a fish and tried to flip out of my hands. But I caught him, and then he turned into a dog and started biting me. But I closed his jaws, and then he turned into a fowl and tried to fly away. And then he turned into water and tried to drip through my fingers. But finally, he turned back into his human form, and I said, just tell me what I wish to know, old man, and I'll let you go. And so he told me. That the only person who could bring apples of the Hesperides to a mortal was Atlas, the Titan, who held up the sky, and that Atlas was in Libya. Libya? Where was Libya? So I began a long journey, and I got lost. I journeyed to the Caucasus. I even went all the way to India.
Hercules, how lucky you are. You've seen so much of the world.
If I'd been lucky, I would have been born into some small village somewhere, and no one would know my name. But at last, I entered the desert valley that leads into Libya. And there was a huge wrestler standing in front of me, blocking my path. He said, I am Antaeus. No one passes here unless they wrestle me. Wrestling. I love it. So we grappled. But strangely, I couldn't believe it. Every time I threw him to the ground, he got up, stronger than he'd been. Usually when I throw people to the ground, they stay there. I couldn't believe it. And he rained blows down upon me that would kill an mother of the earth, and every time he fell to the ground, she gave him fresh strength. So I grabbed him, and I held him up in the air above me, and he reached down crying, trying to touch his mother. He was up there. I put an end to him. I dropped his body, and I entered into Libya. And there in the distance, I could see Atlas, one of the gray titans. His punishment had always been to hold up the sky. And so I walked up to him and I said, Atlas, I'm Hercules. I seek 3 apples of the Hesperides. He knew who I was. He said, very well. I will bring them for you. Hold up the sky while I am gone. There was no other way. So I took the sky up on my shoulders and nothing much happened. A few stars fell from the heavens and mountains collapsed. Nothing serious. And he went off. Of all the things I have held aloft in my life, the sky was theirs. And I waited, straining, until there I saw him, returning 3 tiny gold dots in his palm. But instead of giving them to me, he said, Hercules, I grow tired of holding up the sky. You do it for me. I said, oh no, he's going to leave me here with a sky on my shoulders. I don't know, perhaps it was the lack of conversation, but he didn't seem particularly bright. So I said, I will do so. I will do so, Atlas. Just take the sky for a moment while I fold my lion skin to make a pad on my shoulders. He did it. I snatched the apples and made off more quickly than usual. And then, Hades, I came down here for my last labor, and I took your foul-tempered, 3-headed dog, Cerberus. Ha! You were lucky, ha! He knew better than to fight me, and I threw the dog at Eurystheus' feet. That was my last labor. He could no longer command me. I looked at him. Hercules, I want you to know that I never meant any harm to come to you. Is that right, cousin?
And I only made the labors hard to increase your glory.
You lie, cousin. I walked up and I grabbed him by the cloth around his neck. You know, I looked into his eyes, and something happened that never happened to me before. I felt as if I were inside his eyes, looking up at me. And I said to myself, you never asked me to come here. It was sad, and all I felt was tired and empty. I let him go.
Hercules, you're not gonna...
No, cousin. Live a long life. If there's any punishment that you deserve, it's the life you already lead. I want nothing more from you than to never see you again. And suddenly, I felt the guilt of killing my wife and babies like lifting out of my flesh. and I felt free. And I looked up and I said, "There, Father Zeus, I've done this! I've done this!"
So you were free of guilt at last.
Guilt, yes,
But not rage.
oh, I don't know. I spared him, but I don't know, maybe I was angry at myself for doing that, and not long after, I killed a friend, Iphicus. I don't even remember what he said.
You were still so full of rage, Hercules.
It was trying to leave me. It was trying so hard. It wasn't until I became a slave and a woman that my anger left me for good.
A woman?
Oh yes. For 3 years, I was a slave and a woman.
I don't believe that, Hercules.
If you don't believe it, then I won't tell you about it.
No, 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 no. I want to hear this.
As punishment for killing Iphicus, I was sent to the court of Queen Omphale. Of all the people I had learned from, all my teachers, my weapons masters, even Eurystheus, who had humbled me somewhat, it was Queen Omphale who taught me the greatest lesson of my life. When I arrived, she looked from her throne and she said,
Slave, dress as a woman and give me a lion's skin.
"What?"
Do it.
I had no choice, it was my punishment. So she put on my lion skin and she forced me to dress in women's clothes. 3 years I spent there learning to knit.
What a pretty seamstress you must have made, Hercules.
I wasn't pretty. I was humiliated, my hairy arms sticking out of my dress. But I had no choice. Eventually, I learned to sew my own gowns. Some of them were rather lovely.
So that was a great lesson you learned there, sewing gowns.
No, it was patience, I think. Learning to see others' points of view. All my life, all I'd done is tear things apart. But here were the women, laughing like music, putting things together. So new.
There was never any...
No, we were friends. Eventually, I ended up sitting at the queen's feet, knitting with the girls. I could finally love again. The place where my rages came from was gone. I could love again.
And did you, Hercules?
Yes, her name was Denira. She was the daughter of the king of Etolia. And Megara loved me, and I loved her. And we were married, and we were making our way home when we were about to cross a flooding river, and I heard... And I turned around. There was a centaur. And the centaur looked and said, "I am Nessus.
And I will do you a favor, you're the great Hercules. I will carry your wife across the river on my back, so that she may stay dry."
I don't know what it was. With my rage, all my natural suspicion had disappeared, and never trust a centaur. But like a fool, I said, "You are kind, Nessus. make sure she does not get wet. And he began to make his way across the river with Nemean on his back. But when he reached the other shore, he began to gallop off. And I said, no, no. He was escaping with my wife.
Well, did you let him go?
I regretted the situation, but I could not let him steal her. It was too fast for me to catch on foot. And so there in the water, I drew a poisoned arrow. But as I sighted down my arrow, I thought, here is a poor beast being just what he is. Nothing but instinct. It was a centaur. I've been a centaur all my life. So I loosed the arrow, and it flew across the water and struck his heart. He stumbled, and I ran and asked Nemean, are you hurt? And she said no. As I was making my way up the riverbank, though, I had noticed Nessus whispering something to Nemean with his dying breath. What did he say? I asked her. Oh, nothing. So we went home. Many years passed. Happy years. I lived in peace. No wars, no enemies.
Yes, but Hercules, you're dead. You just died. You're still young. What was it?
I think in the end, love killed me.
What do you mean, love?
Love charm killed me.
A love charm killed the great Hercules.
Yes. Back at the river, Nessus had told Nemean to take a little piece of cloth and dip it in his blood. And it would be a love charm she could use upon me if I never loved her or ever lost my love for her. And he said, never touch it, but wrap it up. And don't tell Hercules about it, otherwise it won't work. She believed him.
But you'd killed him with one of your poisoned arrows.
Yes. The blood of the Hydra was still potent after all those years. And just yesterday, she gave me a new cloak. And I asked her, what is this? And she said, it's a gift. And I said, oh, it is a lovely cloak, Nemean. Thank you. But as I put it on, suddenly it began to burn me. And I said, what is this? And I couldn't get it off, and it burned, and so I tried to tear it off, and chunks of my flesh started coming off with it. And I looked at her and said, what have you done? She told me what the centaur had said, and I said, oh no, my love, you have killed me. I forgave her. She was shattered. But I couldn't get rid of the pain, and so I said to my servants, come, build a funeral pyre and burn me so that I might die. And so they lit the funeral pyre. I burned my eyes, my hands, my iron bones. And I woke up here with you two dreary souls.
So that is the life of Hercules.
What of it? I told you now. My tale is done. May I go?
Persephone? beautiful, tragic. Look, behold, Zeus comes. Welcome, brother.
Yes, welcome.
Hades, brother.
Hercules, my boy. Father. I have questions. Oh, what about your life?
All I can say is you will be remembered. People will tell your story for 3,000 years. If you regret some of the things you've done, look back. All the people you saved you never met. The Erymanthian war never hurt anyone else. The Stymphalian birds carried off no more children. You saved them all, Hercules, even though you never met them. But what about Hera? Hera can harm you no longer. You become immortal. I feel no different, Father. Oh, you will. Look, we are rising now. There is Mount Olympus, a maiden in her garments of mist. Father, it is growing lighter, yes, as is your burden. Father, oh, I just want to be free. If you think immortality frees you from life, then you are Hercules, my boy. For indeed, you are